I think that's the problem, though. Is people feel comfortable in staying ignorant and being arrogant.
Yeah, but if you unpack that, if you bore down into what you just said, they feel comfortable in staying ignorant. Now, wait a second, but just analyse that. They're comfortable, because they're uncomfortable if they don't stay ignorant. If they go down into that deeper, dark
learn
truth,
something, open themselves
it's terrifying.
up. Yeah.
There's a terror under there, okay?
But is it?
So you're getting pretty awkward about this.
No, I'm just listening. I
Hey,
mean,
okay.
you say you're in a catch-22 though, right? You place everyone else in the same catch-22. If they deny what you say,
they're in denial.
then you can easily you just put them in a class of denial.
Yeah.
You can't deny what I say, because if you do, you're a part of the human condition. You know, I reject your opinion because you're obviously not a thinker.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's the position you've put us in. We can't disagree with you, because if we do, well, you're in that group of people who can't think. So
what's it called? The circular argument. Yeah, but there's another name for it actually. But anyway, that's true. There's a problem about if you say that everyone's in denial and then they complain and take issue with something you've said, you say, well, that's just classic denial. So they're in a situation that they can't get out of that. But let me explain that there are situations that have that characteristic about it, that you can't help it if it has that characteristic. I mean, if you're going to admit to something and talk about something that people aren't looking at or something, and then they're caught in this bind where if they complain or take issue, then they're accused of being part of it. I mean, that has those characteristics, right? I didn't create the issue of the human condition. I'm saying, so you can go and verify it. The way to see if what I'm saying is true or not, being very aware, as everyone should be, of what you're pointing out, that is why I accompany every step along the way with great quotes from great literature or whatever, so that you've got this is just not me saying this is some evidence for this. Because you should be totally sceptical. If someone says this is the book that saves the world, you almost should chuck it over your shoulder. This has got to be crap, I mean, that's just outrageous hubris if ever I read it, But then again, this guy seems to be a very impressive philosopher, psychiatrist, so maybe, anyway. So the thing is then is to go into to read it, and this is rational. There's no mysticism or abstract concepts. It's all rational, first principle biology. So you can go in there and test it and question it, and you should at every step, and take issue all along the way. That's the whole. We are conscious thinking, self-adjusting beings. We're in charge of ourselves. So we don't want anybody else. This is the end of faith and belief and the beginning of knowing. We don't want brain anesthetic, we want brain food, we want answers. So if someone brings some answers, we're rational, we can go and look at them. So you're in safe ground, you can throw it over your shoulder, you should rigorously check every idea along the way, and you should take ideas on notice and say, well, okay, that might have some possibility, but I'll keep thinking about it and see if it doesn't. See, you made some pretty good points about that consciousness necessarily means we're all evil. People as a collective are evil, and that's a very rigorous and responsible position to take, to question that, right? So I'm totally with you in your scepticisms and needing to be sceptical, right? That's fine. The question is, all I'm asking you is to take the stuff on notice and read it through and see if it doesn't make sense. So what I'm talking about is, in terms of what you've said, people are fundamentally evil, right? Just to look at that. I'm saying that, and I'm using Plato as example, so I'm not saying this. He's regarded as the greatest philosopher, and he said we're all living in denial, right? So that's, you can take that on or reject it, but he is regarded as the greatest thing, and that is the central concept in all his thinking. And so he's saying we are living in denial of this fearful issue of the human condition. He used the word human condition, the first person who ever used it, as far as I can ever found. And the human condition is the state of being living in this compromised condition, this dilemma of good and evil. Why are humans, as I said, capable of saving a kitten up a tree and then molesting children, or Why are we capable of saving people on one hand? We have this capacity for enormous sensitivity and love, but on the other hand, there's these darker volcanic forces within in the human species, and so unable to make sense of that. Therefore, we live in denial. I mean, we don't live in this cave for nothing. He said we're living in this cave because we are in fear of the imperfections of human behaviour. We're living in denial of the human condition. So he's saying, okay, I agree about not calling it evil. Every time you'll see I see evil, even good, I put in inverted commas, because that's old world criticising, condemning. Because chapter 2 is all about getting rid of that word forever. I use the word upset, that we became psychologically upset as a result of a battle that emerged when we became fully conscious humans. So that this is a dignifying, redeeming, ameliorating, loving, compassionate understanding of the dark side of ourselves. So as the Rolling Stones song said, we needed sympathy for the devil, or William Blake's, marriage of heaven and hell. That's been the objective, to reconcile the two factions that exist in human life, of the dark side and light side, of the young and old, men and women, innocence and upset, country, city, mechanism and holism, science and religion. They're all manifestations of these two poles of the human situation. And one day we had to find the reconciling, loving kind. We had to. This is Lawrence Vanderpost is a great, most quoted author in my book, my favourite writer. He said, true love is love of the difficult and unlovable. That's what that child that's resigning is wanting. When you listen to Brian Carlton's interview with me, which we only did a week or two ago, it's on this website. He found it so relieving. He just transformed him. He said, when you get it, you finally get it, this explanation really does explain the human condition, because you can experience, and that's what Einstein said, truth is what stands the test of experience, which is a scientific method. It has to be subjected to proven and survive. So, and since this experiment is about us, human behaviour, so we're the rat in the cage. We're actually the experiment. So if someone gives us explanation of us, we're in a good position to see if it's true or not, because it should start to make the world transparent. It should help us make sense of ourselves and everything around us. And Brian Carlton says, ever since I've read and got to understand it, I could talk on radio and people ring up and suddenly I can see I can see him behind them because of these insights. So, yeah, I agree we shouldn't use the term evil, and I'm not saying I'm getting rid of evil forever. The idea that humans are fundamentally bad or worthless. As I said, the end result of chapter 2 is that humans are the hero of the story of life on Earth. It's the most wonderful conclusion you could ever imagine. That humans have lived with the burden of the guilt, or whatever you like to call it, feeling unworthy, feeling sufferers of this angers and frustrations and imperfections, and never able to understand why. Yeah, Brian Carlton said, it's a really revealing interview. He said, it's so revealing, I'm just sitting there and staggered. It's just amazing what he says. You can listen to it. The first 20 minutes of it, because we're supposed to be talking about, I'm going to explain the Hebrew, but then, he started yabbering about his resignation he went through. It was so amazing. It was so incredibly revealing. I was just stunned. But anyway, one of the things was, he says, so I'm a 12-year-old growing up through to 15, and I'm searching for answers, like he said. And I realised that for some reason the adults don't want to talk about it, because they're all resigned. They're post-resignation. So they learn, I'm not going near that dark corner. And 2 days after people resign, honestly, you can hardly get them to remember it. It's such a terrifying depression. They never want to revisit that corner again. This is the black box inside of humans we're talking about here. The personal unspeakable, the forbidden part of ourselves. So children are on their own, wrestling with this. And I think one of you said, maybe you can't give it to adolescents or something, because the problem is adolescents are now so instinctively suspicious of adults that anyone ever going to talk to them. I've talked to adolescents and tried to help them. But you can tell in their expression, they're not even trusting any adults that'll ever talk any truth at all. So they're not really believing that you're going to talk truth. So you have to talk a long time before it starts to dawn on them that you are dealing with this, what they're actually wrestling with. And gradually you see their eyes open, and gradually you see them start to instead of this, I'm not, you know, that's what Robert Cole said when he was talking to this kid. You know, the kid wouldn't even look at him. You know, and then he said, "What are you wrestling with? Not yourself." And that's when the kid stopped and looked at him straight in the eyes. And he said, the kid said, why do you ask that? And he said, Robert Cole said, and he said in an act of honesty, because it was outside what I've been trained to do, which is basically deny the human, because I remember being there. And the kid started crying. Why? Because Coles had reached him with some honesty about the utter hypocrisy of human life that the kid could see and no one was admitting. And that changed. The same thing when you read Catcher in the Rye. Holden Caulfield is this 16-year-old that's still unresigned and can see that the world, he calls them all phonies and fakes and they're artificial, they couldn't study, thrown out of school after school. I just want to escape to a little hut by the stream and chop wood, and I don't want to have anything to do with this madness. The world's crazy, no one's admitting it. And then he, like Robert Cole, met this guy like Robert Coles, and this adult who actually ratted on the adult world and admitted that, he said there's a lot of humans that and it saved the character in Catcher in the Rye's life. He said, and what the adult said, this fall, depression, that you're writing for, it's a special kind of fall, a horrible kind, where you just keep falling and falling, utter depression. The adult then spoke of men who at some time or other in their lives were looking for something their own environment couldn't supply them with, so they gave up looking, they resigned. Adding, you'll find that you're not the first person who was ever confused and frightened and even sickened by human behaviour. That's the key line in the whole of that book. You know, because yes, to be confused and frightened to the point of being sickened by human behaviour, indeed suicidally depressed by it, including your own behaviour, is the effect the human condition has if you haven't resigned yourself to living in relieving but utterly dishonest superficial life of denial of it. So you see, just as Robert Coles just spoke a little bit of truth, he said, it's out of school because I'm not supposed to do this, but he just said, I actually remember being there, going through that tight corner, and the kid started crying. And so Holden Caulfield's bouncing around, unable to cope with the world gone crazy, and no one's admitting it, and they're all pretending it's not, everything's fine, and it's not. And suddenly this adult, in an absolute moment of desperation, he talks to this adult, and this adult rats on what they're doing. He says, you're not the first to confused and frightened, even sickened by human behaviour. And at that point, finally, the kid had got some honesty. Now, when you listen to Brian Carlton's interview, he says, so when he's 12 and he's progressing through to 15, he's going through these early stages of it, he learns that adults can't help, they're not interested, and so then he starts reading everything he gets his hand on, he said, all the philosophical books, everything he can get his hand on. He's trying to make sense of human life, and so he's reading everything, and everything's written from inside the cave, so it's artificial and superficial, it's living on the meniscus, it's not down inside, it's just dishonest, and because he's unresigned, he can see through that dishonesty, and he can very quickly suss it out. Who's fake and what isn't? You've got this amazing shit detector if you haven't resigned. That's how I found all these answers in this book, by just thinking truthfully rather than... Anyway, so I'm not clever, I'm just not... Anyway, not in denial of all these truths, and suddenly I could think about things that for some reason I didn't know at the time why no one else wanted to think about. But anyway, so Brian Carlton... So he's searching for the truth, and he's reading everything he gets his hand on. Kids do that, going through resignation. They search for it, but they've got this immaculate shit detector, and they can tell if it's crap, if it's bullshit, if it's not honest, if it's cave talk, cave speak. And everything is. Libraries and huge libraries full of it. All talking about the human condition. I mean, great literature or something occasionally might allude to some truth. And that's why it's great, because it's got a little bit of truth, but not too much. You can take people near to the fire, but not right into the fire. So Robert Cole's got the Pulitzer Prize, I'm suggesting, because of that one paragraph. That little bit of truth he let through was so special, so extraordinary. And so you know, that's been the name of the game. But there's some little bits of truth, but not huge amount of it, kind of thing. And so he's searching and searching, and he says, you'll hear him say it, he says, I got so desperate to find some truth that I started reading the encyclopedia. And he stops me and says, I actually did that. And I was that desperate. Because I'm trying to think, there must be somewhere in this whole damn collection of some truth. I mean, that's how desperate he was to try to find some honesty in this world gone crazy and living in dishonesty, right?